This episode is sponsored by The Botanist Kitchen. The Botanist Kitchen are an incredible company that are owned by Becky and Nathan, and they are the very proud distributors of doTerra Essential Oils. And when you use a doTerra Essential Oil, you are using an oil that is pure with no contaminants, fillers or adulterations. doTerra has created an incredible essential oil. I've used essential oils for years and I have never found one as good as this. It is pure, potent, healing power in a tiny bottle, guys. And if you are a listener to this podcast, then you can head over to the website. The link is in the show notes and get your 25% off your own essential oils. Welcome to She Loves Herself, the podcast, navigating grief season, Tree Carr.
Hi.
Hi. I know. Oh, it's funny because before we started recording, Tree came on and I obviously saw Tree through an Instagram and with Lynette, and she'd said the same about me, but it's so nice to actually connect with you, Tree.
Yeah, it is good. I mean, it's one thing seeing people's static photos on social media, but then once you actually got an animated person in front of you, you're like, oh, that's the energy behind
the person.
Years. Yeah, it's quite cool.
Absolutely. And I was obviously having a little nose through everything that you do. And whilst we are predominantly talking about grief in this season, Tree, I already want you to come back on another season because there is so many things that you do and that you offer to the world that I would love to share in this community, because I think what you're doing and what you offer, what you share is just amazing. And so many people need to know about it.
Thank you. Well, it'd be a pleasure to come back.
There you go. She'll be back for season 9.
I'll be back already.
She'll be back for season 9. So we are, and I'm going to try my best not to digress, because when I was looking at, I'm like, lucid dreams, oh my gosh, I want to go there, like all the stuff and the tarot and everything. But we're talking about navigating grief, and I had actually said on a previous episode with a guest that I was looking to speak to a death doula, and someone that really knows a lot about death and actually navigates grief very differently typically than people like that are around me, that I've grown up with, being around, parents, grandparents, friends, and I guess culturally how we view grief. And it's one of those things that we don't tend to talk about very much, but I'm opening up this platform and speaking to different people about it in the hope that we, as a society, particularly in the UK as well, maybe lean into grief differently. I get messages from people a lot now saying that they've, never grieved properly for the loss of someone 10 years ago, 7 years ago. And it's really sad. And so I'd love to just start with asking you, Tree, how did you get into becoming a death doula? What was it that pulled you towards doing that work?
It's a long story, but it's full of synchronicity and divine timing and all of that.
We love that here.
I'll try to summarize it really, really quickly, because it took a lot of connecting the dots through the long journey of my life to actually see the thread that took me to the point of becoming a death doula. And so when I did that reflection and look back at the long view of life, I'm 50 now. So that's like a long reflection.
My God, Tree, can I just say, you'll need to watch this on YouTube, because Tree does not look 50. Wow.
Half a century. Yay.
But not that 50-year-olds don't look amazing. I don't mean that, but you do not look like, you look at least 10 years younger, at least. Wow.
I don't know, maybe it's hanging around with a lot of dying people. I don't know. Sorry, you have to have a dark
humor.
Sense of humor. Yeah, it's gallows humor all the way for me.
Listen, we're here for that.
You have to be able to laugh at the most darkest things. So I think it all probably pretty much started when I was a child. I had a near-death experience at the age of 4. And in that experience, I surrendered and I let go to the fact that of my own mortality in those moments where I was being swept out to the ocean. It was like I was pulled away in a freak wave in South Carolina in the 70s. My dad saw it happening, so he came and obviously rescued me. That's why I'm here today. But in those moments, it was very, it was very profound experience for a little kid. My whole life flashed before my eyes, which was like literally only a few years.
Yeah, but it must have been terrifying as well.
But it was terrifying. Of course, I tried desperately to save myself by holding on to the docks, but it was being ripped out. But then I had a sense of like a boundary dissolving sense of oneness and like a bit of a peace, but then a great sadness towards my family. Like I wasn't even thinking of myself in that moment. I was like, my mom and my dad and my family are not going to be able to ever find me again. They'll never be able to find my body. Like it was just really clear to me, like, bye, like I was being untethered. And it was almost like an acceptance of that, but a peace with that. And this real sense of empathy and compassion and just love. And so that was my moment, but obviously I was rescued. My dad got me, and he saved me and swam out and got me and brought me to land. And it was funny because when we were back on the beach, he took out his camera and he took a photo of me. And I always remember, I was in shock. I was like, I've been crying my eyes out, like, just in a state of absolute panic. And I always thought, like, why is my dad taking a photo of me at this moment? And I asked him later, the photo always sat in our photo album. And I asked him as a teenager, why did you take that photo of me at that time? And he said, well, because you were saved and it was a really important moment, but also your eyes had changed. Your eyes looked really, there was something about your eyes that looked so different. I actually have a photo here on my
Yeah, let's see it.
And when I think about it,
Wow, God, you're so young.
My eyes are black.
Yeah.
It's like I looked into the infinite abyss.
Wow, there's so much in that, and behind those, it's just behind that little tiny human, isn't there? Like,
I looked into it, and I feel like that's when I really was changed. And really, my relationship with death became very close in that moment. And I always look at that photo. I keep it on my desk to remind me that I looked into the face of death, and it's not creepy or scary. It was an initiation, and it happened, and it was important to happen so that I could help others and be with others in those scary moments of the unknown, of the abyss. What is it? What's out there after our body perishes? And so from that point onward, I started to develop a relationship towards death. My grandfather died a few years after that photo was taken. He died quite young for a granddad. And I remember my mother telling me about that he died, and I was so calm. Like, I was so calm during her conversation. And I could see how, like, with parents, they want to sort of skirt around the issue and try to say it like they went to sleep or they're in heaven now. And I just knew, like, I felt sort of like a little adult in the situation. Like, yeah, I know what that's all about. Like, but I knew I had a real sense, like, there's more on the other side. Because I felt it. And my granddad's Scottish, by the way. My whole family, like Glaswegian. Yeah.
Amazing.
So at his wake, it was an open casket wake. I felt so comfortable just like touching my granddad, holding his hand in the coffin, much to my older relatives freaking out, like, you can't do that. What are you doing? And so that sort of developed. And then as I became a teenager, my best friend, her dad was dying of cancer. It was quite a few years journey at home, like deteriorating. And I felt like I was her go-to person, stood by her side through that whole experience. And I felt like I had the emotional capacity to do that as a teenager. And then the synchronicity started to unfold. So what ended up happening at 17, the first of many synchronicities all through my life, were about like 3 to 4 times a year, I'll be out in public and someone will get into an accident or collapse at my feet with a seizure or get hit by a bus, or there's something happening and I happen to be there at the right place at the right time to help them, call the emergency services, give CPR, keep them comfortable, keep them, talk them through the pain. I held one guy's hand and he had broken ribs from a motorcycle accident in East London. And I was like, breathe, squeeze my hand, breathe, so I just end up being in these circumstances where I seem to be helping people like on these threshold states. And it started happening when I was 17. It was a motorcycle accident my friend and I witnessed. My best friend Ren, he's died since. But this man with the motorcycle accident, like that was like the first time where I was like time stopped and I was really with him to be with him. I was 17 and I told my parents about, this guy and this motorcycle accident, and I knew not to take his helmet off, but I stayed with him, and I don't know if he died or not though, Mom and Dad. Like there was a bit of because he sort of lost consciousness and the paramedics took hold of the situation. But my parents were like, are you okay? Do you need to talk to someone about that? Like, like counseling? And I was like, I was just like, I was fine. I was okay. I'm okay. So anyway, from the ages of 17 to 40, it seemed to be happening a lot, much to the point where a lot of my friends would joke about it. They'd be like, every time we go out with you, Tree, like someone ends up like they end up like collapsing, or there's an accident, and people started thinking like, you jinx people. Like it was that
No one
much.
wanted to hang out with Tree.
Yeah, because there's always there's an emergency. Like, it was like this guy got hit by a bus. He was underneath the wheels. And I was like, it happened right in front of us. And I was the first person to get to him.
Wow.
I had this other time where I was walking down Carnaby Street in London, busy, crowded Carnaby Street. And this man was in front of me and he stopped. And so I stopped because he stopped dead in his tracks and he started to collapse. And I caught him because I happened to be behind him. And he had like a syringe sticking out of his arm. He had shot up heroin and started to go, he was going. But I mean, if I hadn't been there, anyway, that guy's life was saved. So this sort of thing happening a lot. So I'm taking note going, why does this keep happening? And of course, I'm thinking, is it me? Or do I give off vibes that make people like have disasters? I'm getting a complex. And so around the age of 40, it happened again. And this time it was on Broadway Market in East London. And this gentleman was in front of me. He stumbled and he leaned against the wall. And I immediately put my hand on his back and said, hey, do you want to sit down here on this picnic table? As I touched him, he just started to go. And it was weird because as I touched him, I just all of a sudden had this knowing like, this is serious. Like it just like something went through me and I was like, he's going, like, this is crazy. Anyway, there was other people, he was a big guy. So we're like, whoa. And he went down and clearly a cardiac arrest. And so we were immediately on him doing CPR and someone ran to go get a defibrillator from a GP. And we were like calling 999 and his head was in my lap and I was holding his hand. And I knew, but we were trying desperately, but I was like, this is intense. He is dying. And so I just started giving him soothing words. I just kept saying, it's okay. You're not alone. Help is coming. You're not alone. I just kept saying, you're not alone. I felt like this is really important.
Yes, I think that's a big fear for people dying alone.
You're not alone. He was held and his eyes were wide open. It was a beautiful sunny morning, October. It was Monday morning. His eyes were looking up to the sky and they were just open. And he was like, having a heart attack, cardiac arrest. And streams of tears were just flooding down his face. And I kept thinking, what is he seeing? You know, he looks like he's looking at something. And I was, you're not alone. You're not alone. And his last breath, we witnessed his last breath, heard it, just was like gone. And he was gone. And the paramedics did arrive. These things take long. They take like 20 minutes, half an hour. So he was, you know, anyway, they showed up, but they tried their best. They were zapping him, but he had passed. And I was just like, these things keep happening. And thing is, he had a family, a mother and a wife and a daughter. They had walked ahead in the market and they didn't realize that he had fallen behind. So the scene didn't end because they came running back to this total scene of their loved one being zapped on the road, and they were losing it, you know, Dad, like, and I stayed with his mother, who was saying, it should have been me. It should have been me. I was holding her, hugging her. These are strangers to me, but I felt like I was part of the situation. I'm like holding them and hugging them and helping them with their shock, and also helping them with their, like, allowing them to like just scream and bawl their eyes out, and just holding them. It was really like, okay.
Oh, I could cry listening to that.
It was intense.
So
but then I went away from that just going, why do these things keep happening to me? And so I decided to ask my
did that upset you then? You know, when you were calm at other points, how did that impact you? Were you still quite
I was calm?
Yeah.
It's so bizarre. It's like I go into the zone.
Yeah.
And it's like all time stops. And I'm just held in this bubble. And when I was saying you're not alone, I really felt like
people were around.
Not just me, like there's this power, this energy around us. You're not alone. And I, even afterwards, like, I'm not like crying or shaking. I was just more like, wow, why is this stuff keeps happening? And so I decided to do some dream work around it, because I work in the realms of dreams. That's a big area that I like.
Talk to us a little bit about that as well, because that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Dream work around it. What was that then?
Well, I decided to ask my dreams why, like why through my whole life am I cursed? Like, do I curse people? Am I the type of person who I walk around and bad things happen to other people? Because I was feeling bad, you know, again, superstitious about my own me and in contact with strangers on the streets. So I went to sleep, and it was in the morning when I woke up. I had like a quick succession of all the times it's happened in my life where I happened to be in that right place, so at the wrong time, sort of vibe. And then it was like a eureka moment after this like quick succession of visions. And the eureka moment was, this is happening because this is what you're meant to do. So simple, right? This is happening because this is the role you're meant to be in.
Yeah.
And I was like, like slap in the face. And then when I woke up, I was like, that's it. Like, I'm meant to be doing that. That's why I'm there. I'm meant to be doing this. But what is that? I'm not a paramedic.
Yeah.
I'm not a nurse. And I don't feel, and I'm like, I'm not there like stitching up their bloody wounds and stuff like that. Like, I know how to do CPR and I'm doing that, but I'm there like energetically. I'm there. I'm like saying like soothing things. I'm trying to make the person laugh. I'm being there in an emotional way. So I was like, it's emotional. So I was like, I got onto Google. I was like, emotional support at death, around death, like, because that's the only thing I could think of. And the first few pages were death doulas. And I was like, what's that? And I clicked on this one link towards this platform called Living Well, Dying Well. And it's a death doula training. And I read the whole ethos and what it was. And I went, that's me. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah. I emailed them and I said, can you please train me? Because like, so I straight away went into the training and I never looked back. And so that's how I stepped into the death doula role, was this long, like the universe putting me in these places. But the thing is, this hasn't stopped. I'm still always in the right place at the wrong
Right.
time. Now I know, I go, okay, thank you, universe. I'm here. Let's offer some care for this person. Let's offer some, hold space for them, because they're freaking out and in pain and scared. So it still happens, but at least now I know what, you know, I'm at peace with it, like with what to do now.
Oh, I was captivated by that story.
It's such a long story. Sorry.
No, but I honestly, Tree, like when you were speaking, like even like the part when you were a child, I was there. What, like I almost felt I was like in the whole story of the guy at the bus and all of the things, and the motorbike and the guy in London, and oh
Yeah.
wow.
There's so many of them. I had a friend say, you got to start a blog and put like all the different ones, because there's so many, and they were all so they're all so unique. I might do that one day, because it is uncanny. Like it's off the charts how many times it happens to me.
So I did think I wanted to meet you, Tree, but now I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know. I'm serious. It's like, ask even some of my clients how they met me, was because I had one client, like I was at a gig at some sort of event, a band, and I was there and I was just standing watching this gig, and this woman walked past me, and as she walked past me, she literally just fell like right towards me, and I like went, oh, and like I helped her up, and when she stood up, she went, oh my God, and then she walked away. A couple days later, she gets in touch with me. She's like, this is so crazy. I know you don't know who I am, but I know who you are, because I was listening to a podcast 2 weeks ago, and you were talking about your journey to death doula and how people like have accidents or fall around you. And she's like, and then I saw you at the gig, and I went, oh, that's interesting. That's that woman, that death doula woman. And why you? And I fell in. She's like, and I saw it as a sign that I needed to reach out to you. So can I have a session with you for like a tarot session? So I'm not kidding. It keeps happening.
Well, it's interesting, Tree, because what was the first thing I said before we started recording? I'm like, I want to get a tarot session with you. Oh my God. And I will put all of your links and everything, because anyone that doesn't know you or follow you, like you're a death doula, but there's more. There's so much more that you do. And you talked about lucid dreams, and I want to explore so much more of that as well. I'm going to try and not digress, because I'm so interested in this. I'm like, oh,
death and grief.
let's keep to death and grief. Oh my goodness, because I feel like I've opened up so much since the death of my mum in September. And I guess when I was little and growing up, I was so scared of like, oh, death. It's like, it was the thing that everyone was so scared of, the dark, scared of the dark, ghosts and death, right? And I remember like my mum had a long journey with cancer, 19 years. Wow. And she was so scared of death. And my mum was a really like modern, really amazing woman, but you know, she was so scared of death. And even at the end, when she was passing, she was just holding on to life so much, even though her quality of life was not good. Her fear of death was so big that she was just holding on so tightly to this existence, basically, and fear. But it's interesting, I don't know if I've actually shared this before, I don't think I have, but when I was with her, when she was just sort of the day before she was passing, she was sort of doing these things with her hands as if she was trying to sort some things out. And like my sister and I were watching her, and she was still trying to talk, but she couldn't really speak much at that point. And I was saying to her, like, what are you doing, Mum? And she said, I'm sorting things. She was trying to say she was sorting things. And then she said, my mum's here for me. Yeah. And it gave me such comfort, because we always said, like our gran, like her mum, she was so close to her, and she always missed her mum, as you do, you know. And she said, I'm just scared that no one's there for me. And we said, like, Gran will be there, Papa will be there. And when she said, my mum's here for me, it was just like, oh, you know, just that. And I said to my sister, I believe it is, you know, and I really do. And my sister's like, I hope it is. And I think there's this thing where we hope so much that that is the case, but there's always that little bit of fear that it might not be, because no one really comes back and says, I can confirm categorically that this happened. But I do believe it. You know, I feel my mum around me a lot. Certain things happen. My stepdad yesterday actually said, you know, he's missing her so much. It's harder for him coming into a new year. You know, he's in his sort of early 70s.
Yeah.
And we've still got, our kids are young, and we've still got a lot, you know, and he's older. And I was speaking to him last night, and he said, you know, he said, this is really spooky, because he never really believed, but I talk about it a lot. And he said, this is really spooky, Jill. He said, when I'm in the bed, he said, and I'm just coming out of my morning, like out of my sleep, he says, someone's in the bed. He says, it's like I feel her in the bed. And he said, I know you think I'm off my head. I said, I don't. I actually don't. He said, I'm coming out of my dream. And I know that state, you know, that kind of state when you're just coming out of your dream. He said, and it's almost like someone's either sitting on the bed on her side or lying on it. And he's like, I just feel it. It's like, I can totally feel it there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know it. I said, you should talk to her. You should talk to her.
Yeah. And you can talk to her in those liminal thresholds. That's when they can come through, and my heart goes out to you and to your family for your mother passing, and also the supporting journey through your grief, your own grief. It is an evolution through the process, and but it sounds like there's some really comforting moments on those thresholds when she did pass and transition, and her doing this hand thing. That this is very common at end of life, when someone's on the very threshold of death. They do these sort of plucking things out of the air. And none of, like, hospice and a lot of the nurses think they don't quite understand. They know that someone's close to death when they do that, but like no one quite knows why. The medical business would probably say, oh, they're just it's because of the medication or whatever they're on. But from a more cosmic perspective, perhaps, I believe that the person is accessing the other realm, and they're working with energy. She's sorting things out. She's moving. And I've had these sort of situations with other, you know, clients as moving through my journey as a death doula, and also with my own sister who died 6 months ago. So she was also doing this, and she kept saying, there's copper wires like flowing out of my hands. She was trying to articulate it. There's copper wires flowing out of my hands. So there's something energetic that happens. I mean, this is just my theory. On these thresholds, the ancestors come in, there's deathbed visitations. This is all very common and not very talked about, because we live in a very, you know, material reductionist world where there's no belief system or cosmology for space for other dimensions or things beyond death. But it's very studied. There's a great book called The Art of Dying by Peter Fenwick, who's a doctor. He wrote this book as case studies, and he has a list of lots of different case studies of people who have these deathbed phenomenon when they're on the verge of death, where they've had visitations with loved ones, or orbs or lights in the room, or you know, the plucking, and just various things that can help support, you know, the understanding of what can happen to people. But it can bring so much closure and comfort, and it makes for a beautiful transition. And especially for your dear mother who had the fear, you know, we don't know what's on the other side. Right? It's like me as a little kid with the black eyes looking into the abyss. What is beyond that? But I did sense this boundary dissolving one, and everything's just okay. Everything's okay. So for her to be able to be supported through the visitation of her own mother, and sorting things out energetically, is just amazing. That you,
I know. And I think the hardest thing, or I believe, certainly for me and people I've spoken to with death, it's when they pass. We miss and I do even now, you know, you miss, because all I've ever known is the human form of her. So I went on my own spiritual journey 5 years ago, and I'm much more much more open and conscious than I ever was then. But all we ever know is what we have with us, you know, and a lot of the time we're not, it's not talked about in school. We don't learn this. We don't learn about spirituality so much the way, you know, we learn about religion, specific religions, and the ones that I was going to say the word conform, that was the wrong word, but the one that we're brought up with, right?
Yeah.
So you're this and you're this. And that's what we learn. We don't really learn what I've learned in the last sort of 5 years and how that's helped me so much. But it's, I missed her touch, you know, the touch, the voice, her smell. You know, I had Jenny Powell on a few weeks ago, and she was saying when her dad died, she said she got some of his old jumpers, and she said sometimes she just goes and has a sniff of them. And I was like, I relate to that, because everyone has this smell, right? And you know, it's comfort that I felt in her human form. And I believe if we learned more about death as children growing up, we wouldn't be as fearful, we wouldn't be as attached to the humanness, and understanding that there are other ways, and that this is only one part of life as such. There is another part. And when we think about what can happen and oneness, and you know, when we pass over and what that means, and I think it wouldn't be as scary for people. We wouldn't be as attached.
Yes. And isn't it funny how in school we're taught sex education, like the creation of life, but we're not taught about what happens at the end. We live in a culture obsessed with repressing death, actually. It's youth, life immortal. Like it's about keeping on
younger,
going and and so I really think that once we start to shift our attitudes towards death by teaching it as part of an education curriculum, that will I mean, that will really shift things. But it's got to start, well, probably needs to start at home. It's good that parents have really clear and honest and transparent conversations about all things death and dying in a language that helps the child. It doesn't have to be like the full-fledged, you know, reality of it. But certainly in schools, there should be a curriculum where we're taught about just the reality of death and what happens with death. Like, so it's not a mystery, even just like the body, how the body shuts down in the 3 crucial days just before a person passes away.
Oh yeah, you just have to look much. It's Google that you need to look up for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have had guests on here saying, yeah, no one told them. They just had to look up Google.
Yeah, and even the doctors won't tell you. They'll sort of skirt around it, but they will at the last minute saying, "I don't think she'll make the night. Like I don't make it. They'll make it through the night." But even on like a terminal illness or a prognosis, they, like in my experience, they sort of leave it to bit last minute.
It's very cagey, isn't it?
Cagey. People are like
cagey.
I
can't really say. I don't want to really think about it. Oh, guess what? I'm digressing. I've just looked out my window and there's a little deer walking past. How cool. So cool, isn't it?
Well, loved ones, I've found in the loved ones that I have passed for me, they come through in nature. And that's one thing I've really learned is they do their little appearances like, here I am, and they come in.
Oh, there's 2.
Oh, good.
Oh, everyone, we'll go back. We're going back. But honestly, that's what's just happened. And I do think sometimes when we talk, these things happen, right?
Yeah, they do.
The people that go to a grave, and then even in summer, and a robin appears, and it's like these things that happen. It's like, or they hear a song. And I want to talk about that, actually, the ways that we can connect when someone has passed. Would you be open to sort of giving us your perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is one of those things, right? So some people will have a ontological belief where they feel like perhaps, yes, our consciousness can carry on after our body dies. But then, of course, other people hold the view of like, that's it. Once your body dies, your consciousness dies too. So there's nothing, this is it. But I do feel that I can offer a bit of like how you can connect in your own way, because some people have their belief system doesn't, you know, extend to life after death. So if you're from the point of view where like, that's it, I don't believe that my mother is, is around anymore, and yet you still want to feel like you want to connect, you can do it in a way that is quite simple. Connecting could involve just reading an old text message from your mom. That's a way of connecting. Listening to your mom's favorite song, or even paying a visit to a grave. That's still a form of connection. So even if you don't believe that she's still around, you're still honoring her, and you're connecting at least to the memory of her, the energy of her. And that can be deeply healing and therapeutic, and also help with bereavement. But if you do have the belief system where you think a little bit more beyond, it's slightly more cosmic, and you believe that, wow, my mom's somewhere, don't know where, but I still feel her around, then there's certain ways you can connect. You can connect into dreams. So before you go to sleep at night, you can set an intention to, I would love to connect with you, Mom. And just set intentions and affirmations as you fall into sleep. That's one way. And then sometimes people feel that they have a visit from their loved one in the dream, and it's profound, and they wake up feeling like they really were with their loved one. And that, again, that helps with the grieving process, and it brings a sense of closure for some as well, especially if you haven't been able to actually physically be with your loved one when they died. So this can help so much. So dream work can be really helpful for people who are exploring consciousness beyond the body. That's a really great place to go.
I love that. I love that. My mum, I've had a number of dreams about my mum.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And sometimes it's when I've asked, and other times it's happened when I've been very busy in a day and I maybe just haven't sat and thought about her enough. Maybe not enough, but sometimes we get busy and then I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. And then I'll go to sleep and everything sort of subsides. And then she'll come in the dream. It's maybe that I've not that I've been suppressing intentionally at all, but if I've been overstimulated or busy, and then I sort of just go to sleep, everything sort of subsides, and things that I maybe just need to connect with and feel into a bit more, I feel seem to come up in the dream. I don't know if that is a common thing or not.
Yeah, I think when we have moments of stillness is when we can receive these connections. And it really, there's a biological thing to it. So there's a science to it. Effectively, when you go into these quieter, stiller states of consciousness, your brain waves have slowed down. So we're usually working and operating in a beta brainwave. That's our thinking, chattering mind. And when we go into a meditation, or we go into sleep, or we have just a very relaxed, mindful state of mind, like we're drawing or playing an instrument, our brainwaves move into the theta brainwave. And it seems to be that is the sweet spot in which we can receive non-ordinary states of consciousness. That's where we receive insights or great intuition, or have a visitation, or have a eureka moment. And it's very different. So we can get there in so many different ways. Now I'll give you an example, like of this really interesting experience I had like about 3 weeks ago in terms of visitations. I had to go to the hospital to have like a biopsy done. And they said, we'll put you under general anesthetic because it'll probably be about 30 minutes and it might be uncomfortable for you. So we'll put you under general anesthetic. So I said, yeah, sure. So I went under general anesthetic with the, they did the whole thing, shot me with the
quite a nice feeling, isn't it? When you're like, whoa.
You're like, whoo, and the oxygen mask. And so then, then you're gone. Next thing I know, I guess I'm coming out. So I'm coming out of general anesthetic, and it's sort of like this wrapping up. It's like you're in the abyss. You're in like something that's somewhere else. And then, but all of a sudden you hear like and like you come into reality. So all the sound, everything, it's like someone's dialed it up. So it's like, and as soon as I surfaced, I was weeping, and I was saying to the nurses, I was with my sister. I was with my sister. We were together. She was teaching me things, and she taught me 10 things, but I can't remember now what they are. I can't remember. And the nurses were like, don't worry, it's in you. You'll remember, it's inside of you. It's in you. And then I was coming to, and I was sobbing, and I was like, I miss her. I love her so much. I miss her. The nurses were in tears, bless them. It was a really profound experience. So I had connected with my sister who died, about 6 months ago in general anesthetic. I don't recall what was going on. I don't recall the place we were or the context, but something happened, and I was given 10 lessons from her, teachings from her. They're in me. So I know I've got to sort of, one of them has come to me like last week. So I know one of them. And one of her lessons to me was, you will always find me in nature. I am in nature. That's why I said those 2 deers that showed up. Well, that's really good. And it's true. She's come through in a lot of synchronicities through various appearances of animals, birds, and
oh wow, goosebumps. It's just, there's so
you
much
can't access it.
there is, and there may be people listening that think there isn't. I think most people that listen to this are open to knowing more, for sure.
Yeah,
even if they may be already there, but they're certainly open to knowing more. And I think it's such a beautiful thing, and it's such a comforting thing if you don't think, oh, well, that's just it. Because when we often think that's just it, that's when a lot of the time we suppress and we just go, right, that's it. That part of my life now is no longer there, and I must move on with my life. And it's like, we don't take that person with us. Of course, they're not here in the physical, but we can take them with us. Like at Christmas, we were a little nervous because it was our first Christmas, and my mum's a massive part of Christmas. But we sat around the table and we lit a candle for her. And it was funny because my sister's like, Jill's going to speak. And I'm like, I'm not prepared. We're sitting around the table. I'm like, what am I going to say? Do you know that way? Usually I speak before we have like a big Christmas dinner. I'll say something like a bit of a prayer or something. She's like, wait, Jill, you speak. And I'm like, oh. But I just spoke, and it was just literally a few minutes. My mum wouldn't have wanted us to go on and on, but it was lovely, and it was a great representation of her, and the candle was there, and we had such a beautiful day tree. It was so lovely, and we still laughed and had lots of music on, and yeah, it was just beautiful. And of course it would have been better if she was here, but what I must remind myself of is that the life that she had the last few years, she deserved better than that, and she was holding on, and through fear, and because she wanted to be here, and she didn't believe there was anything else, and think she wanted to, but I think she was just so scared, and she just wanted to be around us. But yeah, I just know she's around us. I know it, and it gives me so much comfort. So for anyone listening to this, if you can even try and, like, sometimes even just putting on a favorite song, like you said, something like that, and just getting really still. Often we're so busy and we're in our heads, but actually the more that we can drop into our heart space and taking those breaths, like those heart-centered breaths, I feel just allow me to really get into my body and feel more deeply. And sometimes the emotion just comes, sometimes it will just come over me, and I'll be crying for a few minutes, and then it passes. But I think I'll always have that. When you love so hard, it can hurt really hard too, right?
Yes, absolutely. And grief is not a linear thing. So a lot of people think that, as time passes, moving forward, the grief will start to dissipate. But grief, it will always be in the heart of your heart. It will always be there, but you just think of it as a little black, grief ball, and it's there. But you start to grow around your grief as you evolve. it will always be there. It cracks open every once in a while, but in the center of it is pure hot, like liquid love, you know.
That's
So
love.
if you lean into the grief and just be like, that's love trying to express itself,
Of course it is.
it feels much better. I always liken it to waves, like a big tsunami wave. When the grief comes, when the wave comes, don't try to fight that wave. Just let it engulf you, because on the crest of that wave is your loved one there. Is it ready to like embrace you? So even though it feels difficult, like with the catharsis of sobbing or crying, just allow the process. The thing is, people don't allow themselves to cry, and it's actually not very good for your body. You know how much energy it takes to suppress like tears? It's insane. Like when you build up to cry, your blood pressure rises, your heart starts to beat much quicker. And if you allow the tears and the sobbing, your body, the biology goes back into homeostasis, and then you're back into this balance. But if you suppress that, you're doing great damage, I think, to your nervous
and your physical,
physically,
like
and then
physical
also
body,
and the energy. You need to get it going. So I'm a big advocate of catharsis, the cathartic process of grief. And what I mean by that is really leaning into the expression of grief. So in the West, we have the whole stiff upper lip thing, where it's like, no, you gotta like, don't show you're sad, or don't cry, hold it, like, you know, get it together, strong, go back to work on Monday. You know, people don't take grief leave and like all this sort of stuff. But I'm a big advocate of like, let it rip, let it out, like, you know, sob, wail, like primal wailing, crying, sobbing, curl up in fetal position, rock if you need to, like just get it out of your system. It is important. In fact, many cultures all around the world today still practice a form of catharsis, like collectively, even in groups and families, in order to process their grief. And studies show that if you show catharsis and you're able to let it out, your grieving cycles are much like smaller than someone who's suppressed it. Then they end up dealing with that grief 25, 30 years later, and it's eating up at them. And so there's something to be said about this, the physicality of grieving, you know, and movement's part of it too, like shaking, dancing, moving. It's really the whole thing. The reason why I got into catharsis around the grieving process was when it was in 2016. My best friend, Ren, I talked about him. He was my high school friend, who we witnessed the motorcycle accident together. He suddenly and tragically died in 2016, and it was a shock. So it was a real shock, because I got an email from his sister saying like he had died. And I was like, opened up my phone and and looked at this email, and the first sentence was like, you know, we found Ren's body washed up on shore at this location. And it was so weird. Like this voice came out of me that like, I was like, who's that? It was just like this guttural, like this cathartic primal scream came out of me. And I continued to, my whole body was like that, shaking. Like, it was so natural. It was so natural. And then I just went with it. I just allowed it to do, my body and the energy and my soul and whatever it was, allowed it to do this like freak out. And it wasn't until after I like, you know, really reflecting, like, that's so interesting that the human can like response was to do that. And I let it happen. And I was like,
if you let it happen, but imagine that you had suppressed that. Imagine you'd felt it and thought, oh, I better not. There's people around. I better just.
I didn't know. I let it rip.
But imagine the damage, potential damage you're doing to yourself by suppressing it.
Yeah. And it needed to do that. We're human, right? We're human. We're connected. There is a primal.
Well, if you think about animals in the wild.
Yeah.
Shaking, even my dog, you know, when he has a fright or You know, he jumps out the car, he doesn't like the car. So when we take him out, the car, he has a shake. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and I can relate to what you were saying. That this happened to me in Bali. I was getting reflexology, and she was a Balinese healer. She was an amazing woman, and she just pressed a certain point, and I was okay. I thought before it, I'm sitting there fine, really enjoying my reflexology, and then whoosh, whatever she did, it just came right through me, and I thought, whoa,
Yeah.
oh, this is huge. And I thought, right, keep it together, because you don't want to wail in front of this poor lady doing it, and everyone in the shop. And I literally ran back to the room, and I shut the door, and I broke down for 3 days. I couldn't leave the room.
Oh, bless you. Well, she unlocked something for you.
Yeah, she unlocked something. And
But you know how it is, we hold back even in sessions where we know we're getting a healing. I'm all about, like, I do sessions with those who are bereaved, and we breathe through it, and I breathe through it, and I cry with, like, we wail together. Like, it's so great. It helps with closure. It helps with the grieving process. And for my own too, I got in touch with my colleague, Brian Morrison. He's amazing. He runs the Breathing Project. He's a breath worker, and we do retreats together and whatnot. I called him up. I said, look, like, I'm really heavily in my grief right now around my sister. And I'm wailing a lot and crying a lot at home, but I feel like I need to have some support. So can we do a breathwork session centered around cathartic release? And we did this insanely powerful session and he knew, like, that tree was going to be wailing and, like, howling, and it just was so good to do that.
Oh, healing.
It was so
The
good.
natural way that we can heal ourselves, Tree, by doing this. But I think it's that giving ourselves permission. So many people get so embarrassed. And even with me, who knows quite a bit about this, because she was doing reflexology, it was just reflexology. It wasn't around grief or anything. So I was more thinking, oh my God, I don't want to make her feel uncomfortable. I'll just quickly pay her and run back to the room. But it scared me because I've never cried that long in my life.
Yeah.
I've never cried for as long as that before. And I was on my own, and I'd had what they call Bali belly before it. So there was nothing in my stomach. There'd been nothing in my stomach for days. And so there was nothing to hide from. There was nothing to mask. It was just raw. And I couldn't stop then. I remember walking down to have breakfast, and I just tried to eat, and I just kept crying at the breakfast table on my own. And at the time difference, I couldn't speak to anyone, and actually phoned Lynette, and she ended up having a really beautiful session with me, her and my friend Natalie. But that has taken me to another level. It has really cracked me open on a level that has allowed me to drop into my heart more than I ever have before. And I thought I'm quite good at getting into my heart space. This is just another level of, it cracked something open. And for that, although it was so painful, Tree, it's the most incredible experience ever of my life. It's changed me.
So would you say, in your opinion, that grief is transformative?
Yeah.
So how did you feel it transformed you, apart from cracking open? Anything else coming into your spirit?
For sure. My connection almost to my higher self, like to drop into that theta state very quickly now. I can get in there very quickly, in a matter of probably under a minute now. I can just drop in and just be very in my center. Whereas it would normally take me a little bit longer. Sometimes it could be quicker, but now I can sort of just almost 3, 2, 1, and I'm sort of in that space. And also the downloads come through now, and I very much trust myself on a new level. Like, I'm not attached to things I was. Like, I let go of work, and people were saying, like, why are you not working? And it's not that I couldn't. Like, I work a lot with clients and I love it, but there was just a knowing that I had to just pause till the end of the year and really just be. And it allowed me to be more present and just to trust that this doesn't know, but this knows. This doesn't make sense of why I do what I do, and that's okay. But this, the heart, for anyone that's not watching on YouTube and you're just listening, I'm pointing at my heart. It's allowed me to trust. Don't get me wrong, like sometimes fear still comes in, old habits and things like that. But there is a knowing now. There's just a knowing. I feel like my purpose is much clearer now too. Whereas I thought it was before, but it's deeper. And when I'm getting sort of the downloads, when I'm journaling, it's like my higher self or God, whatever it is, it's not me, the Jill, it's the human Jill. It's like, it's talking through me. Like, it's like telling me what to do. You know, Jill, this is this and this is that, and and you need to do this, and this is your path. And it's like when I read back journal entries from sort of Bali, you talked about a wave tree when you were talking about the waves. I wrote a blog entry. It was actually a journal entry, and I shared it as a blog entry because I wanted to share it with people. When I read it back, it was all about the waves and how they're all different, and they represent our emotions. Some are big and some are small, and some are little ripples. And actually, we always just want to chase maybe the smaller ones because they're not as big and they're not as scary. But actually, when they all come in, and it was all about be the shore, because when it all comes in, it all dissipates and we basically alchemize. And when I read certain things back, I think, that wasn't me. Like, I didn't write that. Like, and I love it though. My connection is deeper than it's ever been. And for that, I am so grateful.
So isn't that interesting? And that is life beyond grief, of those 3 days of really heavily grieving. So grief can be an initiator. It can also be, help people awaken. And grief is also a great teacher as well. So when we surrender to grief, and I know that seems counterintuitive, like, why would I want to surrender to such an unpleasant feeling? I don't want that feeling. I want to avoid it. So we have an aversion towards tears and upset and heartbreak. But when you allow it to fully express itself, like the wave coming, you allow it to come and crash over you, there's something beyond that intense feeling. It does dissipate. So as you know, when you're heavily crying and sobbing, and it does work itself out. It does settle. It does eventually settle. So even though you said, oh my God, am I going to be like this forever? Am I going to be like,
and I love that there's people like you. I mean, I didn't know a death doula existed. Honestly, I would have probably connected with you before if I knew, because I felt so scared and alone over there. But I honestly believe, Tree, because when I ever tried to connect with someone, it didn't work. Like my Wi-Fi wouldn't work, or something failed, or when I met a friend, they were just leaving that day. Oh, let's connect. Oh, I'm just leaving today. It was like it was always supposed to be that way for me. My path was to be alone and do it alone, and also understand that you're never alone. I felt so scared and alone, but I had to be alone to realize I wasn't alone. If
yes,
that makes
exactly.
sense. That was my lesson, because the whole vulnerability piece of feeling like I've lost everything around me. I had to lose everything to know that I would be okay losing everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. And
people are probably listening going, what are you talking about? But honestly, sometimes I think probably my biggest fear was losing everything. But then to know that I would be okay, it's a strange thing, but it's changed my life. It has changed my life. And yeah, it's huge. And don't get me wrong, when it's horrible, when you feel shit, when you're in that pain, because you do think like, oh my gosh. I remember a journal entry and I wrote, I don't know who I am anymore. I feel like I've lost my identity. I don't know who even am I? Like, what if I never get my spark back? What if I never feel joy again? That was how low I felt. I felt so low. And, and then something came in and started talking to me again. You're not alone. This is your path right now. You're safe. And it was like something's channeling through. And it was just, And so anyone, like, if you're feeling that way, like I would say, if anyone is feeling that way, do you work with people that the people have already passed, like family members or friends that are going through grief? Do you work with them as well, Tree?
Yeah, I do. So I do grief support. So I help for people, those who are left behind, because death isn't just like an issue for the person who died. It also affects all of those who are left behind, right? So it's a community issue. It's a collective issue. And so I also hold space for people grieving. I help people mindfully move through their grief in a way that involves the cathartic release of the grief, but then also self-care too, because like there's so many different things that you move through, and you touched upon a few of them, one including like you lose your sense of identity sometimes. When you've lost a loved one, you're like, who am I? What am I? Am I a fraud? Like, am I even real? Like, am I?
No. And then all your shame comes up.
Yeah,
like,
shame.
all my shame came up.
Yeah.
But then I did plant medicine, so that didn't help. And then the shame really came in tenfold. I was like, oh.
Lots of things get unearthed.
Yeah.
And you have days where you're like depressed. You're like, I don't feel a spark or a magic or connection. Everything you feel jaded. You're like, nothing is alive. Everything is dead. Like you get these weird mindsets where, but you got to realize it's just like clouds in the sky that will blow through and something else will come through and present itself.
And it always
has so many layers and so many, there's, I think Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she wrote, the different stages of grief, and like a lot of them are, but I don't really believe these stages can come in a linear way. They just might come in all, at various times where there's bargaining, there's denial, there's depression, there's, anger and rage. There's all of these different things, a whole plethora of things to pop up, and you're like, okay, well, that's part of the process. And it's really helpful to be aware that none of this will last forever. So, because it's like, oh, this is the way it is forever. And you do have to be mindful to just like let it do its process as well. Due process, basically.
Yeah. Amazing. Wow, Tree, I could speak to you all day. Oh, so amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure, Jill.
Beautiful conversation. So how can people connect with you, Tree? And are you, because I noticed that you were doing something around the dreams. Is that sold out?
So lucid dreaming. Yeah, I'm running my annual lucid dreaming 6-week online course. It starts on Sunday, January 8th. So that might be too soon.
Okay.
But I do have something coming up in February around death and grief. I'm doing a lecture called Transforming Death. It's the history of catharsis and the cathartic release around grief. And so that lecture will be speaking about how we can reconnect to these more person-centered approaches of like releasing our tears, our wailing, our sobbing, and how other cultures are
it's
still
so
doing
important. The somatic work, it's just,
that's right, the somatic.
Yes. Yeah, I use that a lot with clients, and it is huge. It's huge. It creates so much space.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, amazing. Tree, I'm going to drop all your links in the show notes, and I just want to say thank you again for your time. What a beautiful
Thank you, Jill, and thank you for sharing your journey with your mom and through the amazing initiation into heart-centered connection and love that those 3 very tough days brought you. That, what a great an amazing experience, and may that deepen for you as you move forward, and also in all of your help for others in community, because that's the beauty of this, is that it's not self-contained. You actually end up helping the collective through your own personal journey. So thank you that you're here for all of us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, we'll chat again soon.
Thanks.